No?
Recording in progress.
There we go.
Okay.
I had a
All right.
feeling. I had a
Sorry,
feeling.
you'll have to just try to remember the
Thank
earlier
you.
parts, but so these beautiful decorations, I had no idea how it all happened, why it started, just what the origins of it were, until I started working for Colonial Williamsburg, and we are well underway, but I'm still trying to figure a little bit parts of it out. I mean, I have really only been with Colonial Williamsburg for 5 years. And I knew Laura, and I knew Susan, and I knew Roland professionally. And as much as I loved my job with York County, I really always wanted to be here. So when Roland was putting out the word that he was retiring, I was putting in the plug. So I'm really very honored to have been hired on even as a manager, and now to be the director, it's beyond. So anyway, back to the talk. So back in the early 1930s, it's Depression era. And although things were very practical, people were being very practical, but they also needed something uplifting. And the Rockefeller Center was under construction at the time. And the construction workers at the Rockefeller Center wanted to do something for the community. They recognized the need for something uplifting, I suppose. And so they pooled their funds and they erected a 20-foot Christmas tree that they decorated with cranberries and paper garlands and tin cans, and probably left over from their lunches, their meals, maybe. And from that was really well received. Rockefeller recognized it, and 2 years later, he had a 50-foot tree with 700 lights and a tree lighting ceremony. And that started the tradition that we still see today. So in Williamsburg at that time, though, Williamsburg was only partially restored. I have to catch up here on my notes, just 1 second. And it was well underway, but it was only partially restored. But the town of Williamsburg was just a regular residential town. And the residents were really decorating with modern decorations as they would in any small town at that time. And I'm used to having my notes on the screen, so I apologize. So tourists started coming to see the progress being made, and what they saw was just really a very limited decorations for the season. They found red lights in the Wren building, and there was a handful, maybe a dozen trees on Duke of Gloucester Street that were decorated with colored lights. But they really were expecting to see something a little different or something more. And really the officials in Williamsburg at the time recognized that. And so they asked the researchers to do research to find out what colonists would have done. How would they have decorated at the time? And what they found out is that there really wasn't any evidence for decorations outdoors, but there was quite a bit of evidence for the use of evergreens indoors. So they were using holly and whatever evergreens were in the area, laurel or a wax myrtle, mistletoe. And we're hanging it in the windows maybe in vases. Churches were also decorated indoors, but there really wasn't a lot of evidence for the outdoors. But the officials again recognized that there needed to be some balance between authenticity, which was pretty stark, and modern expectations. So they really decided that let me go back, that they needed this balance, and really decided that just a natural Christmas or an old-fashioned Christmas would be the compromise between the two. So they started bringing back some of, or utilizing some of the English traditions that they found in their research. And some of the customs that were already being done in some of the other colonies. And the lights, I have to find myself for a moment. They start, well, anyway, we're gonna wait from here. They started installing the lights, which was an English custom, and it was a way to recognize the king, celebrate the king, but that's beside the point. And I have this slide up here to show that in the beginning, they were only decorating from like December 20th through New Year's. Today, we decorate from the week of Thanksgiving and start taking decorations down January 2nd. So it's a much longer season. So back to the history, and I'm just going to get through this history as quickly as I can. So they recognized, they decided to keep things as natural as possible. Initially, the decorations were just evergreens, as I said. But at the time, there was a renewed interest in English sculptor Brindling Gibbons, and he created these beautiful wood carvings of fruit and birds and other natural materials, as well as Italian sculptor Luca della Robbia, who became known for the terracotta works framed with wreaths and fruit and other natural materials. And these are some of his glazed pieces, which are amazing, but I think we all know the terracotta pots with the wreaths around them. Beautiful. As well as wanting to stay within the boundaries of the colonial American history, they referred to the Rupert Filbert's prints and other period documents for the selection of fruit and flowers and other plants that would have been recognized by the colonists at the time. So this became the influence for what we now know as the Williamsburg style Christmas decoration. Isn't it beautiful? So still at the time though, this is going back. You know, we're now, I don't know what period of time this is. I don't know if this is still the 30s, to be honest with you, if we're into the 40s, but they probably still in the 30s, really making this transition from the modernly decorated town to this historic town decorated in an old-fashioned way. And the residents are still doing their thing. It's still only partially restored. And so So the officials at the time, and I'm going to be honest, I think it was a combination of CW and the city. Really, in order to get the buy-in from the residents to make this transition from their colored lights and their tinsel to the more natural, old-fashioned style Christmas, they started what we know today as the competition. To get their buy-in, they supplied the greenery, and we still do today to the residents. They developed a friendly competition that we still have today, as well as an award ceremony. So as I mentioned before, now we're going to get into what we really do. So with the season being extended, and at the time, they were also only decorating a handful of properties or buildings. We are decorating over 100 buildings, and that's just the landscape department. So then there's all the residents and trade shops. So when it's all done, it's a couple hundred buildings that are decorated at the end of the season. And I know some of you, I recognize some of you in here, and our designers. It's quite something. It's a process, but this is just an indication of the quantities of materials we use. When we go through cases of fruit, I mean, cases. We use 1,105. I mean, these are guesstimates. This is sort of what's ordered. Feet of white pine roping. Sometimes I'm actually ordering more wreaths and tacking them on to another order, picking them up in Merchant Square when it gets crazy. The 900 bunches of dried flowers, and those are in addition to what we collect from the gardens and dry. It's a lot of stuff. And we start this process because it is a really monumental task. It's almost all year, not entirely, but almost. So during the summer, as I said, we're starting to collect materials from the gardens and drying them all throughout the season. Pomegranate flowers, gomphrena, yarrow, peppers, and they almost all get used in addition, as well as the materials that we have to buy in. In September, we will start meeting with our designers, and they'll select the properties that they're interested in decorating. This list is really like 3 of these sheets, but I included this one because I don't know if you can see at the very end, it's 108 properties. This is this year's. And in October, we started a little early this year, but I think it's going to be good. So we started, our designers come together and they start working and making the dry decorations. So because our season is so long and some of our properties are in full sun, we do use the dry materials because it helps us extend the season, reduce maintenance. So I don't know that 50%, but maybe at least 35% of our, maybe a little more. I honestly am not sure the exact percentage, but a portion of the decorations are made with dried materials. So that would be on a grapevine wreath with the dried flowers. That grapevine wreath might be mounted on a fresh green wreath. And when that fresh green wreath dries out or starts to dry, it's easy to replace rather than, But many of our decorations are made fresh wreaths with fresh fruit, and they're really stunning. Our designers do a beautiful job. So when they're working on these dried materials, or all of their decorations, actually, they'll take inspiration from the properties. This one to the left here is the Durfee shop, which is the tailor. So this designer is laying out her materials, trying to decide what she's going to use, how she's going to lay them out. And she did end up using that big, wide ribbon that year. It was wonderful. And the decorations on the right are just an example of some that are used on a tavern. They've got the pipes, they've got the beer mugs, they've got the tobacco, so those are all ingredients that relate to the property. We're also responsible for decorating the interior of the taverns, the 4 taverns. And so last year we sort of got a break because most of the taverns were closed, and they asked us to just do the entrance area of Chowning's and King's Arms Tavern. This year they want us to decorate the entire building again of Chowning's and King's Arms, and just do the entrance of Shields Tavern, which will be used for private events. But the other 2 taverns will be open during the holiday season, apparently. So then in November, our team of designers at Uber Beavers are decorating, they're starting their fresh decorations. And after these are, and they're making wreaths and swags and decorating baskets, and they just do an incredible work. And all of these are stored in a cooler down at our design center that's about, I don't know, 15 by 30, something, yeah. And because these decorations, they're accumulating, they're over a couple of week period of time before they get hung. And we have shelving in there, and there's probably 70 or more decorations in there before we start hanging. It's amazing. But I have to give credit to our residents. Some of them do amazing work. And these are just 2 examples, but every year there's such talent out there. Many of them are artists anyway. I mean, they're historic trades folks, or they're just really talented. They do some amazing work, as well as our trade shops. So when things changed back in 2017 and we had a reduction of staff, and we actually weren't sure how we were going to do Christmas, to be honest with you, at that time. Initially, it all worked out. Thank you for our fabulous volunteers. But we invited the trade shops. We just put it out there. Would you all be interested in decorating your shops? Because we could really use your help this year. And many of them stepped up, and they continue to. They've really gotten into it. And they do incredible work. These are just 3 examples. They are artists, and it comes out clearly in their decorations. And then, of course, these decorations have to get on the buildings after they're made. And so it's a large team of our carpenters and painters that do this work. And so the first week of Thanksgiving, up to Thanksgiving, they're going to be hanging just the plain greenery, wreaths and roping on the buildings. They'll also decorate, or hang the decorations for all the retail shops, the 4 taverns, and sometimes they're like they can start hanging some of the dry stuff. It just really depends on their schedule of their other work also. And then we move into after Thanksgiving, the Friday, they'll start hanging the fresh decorations. The Monday after Thanksgiving, we will hang the palace. But prior to Thanksgiving, the courthouse and the Capitol, our decorations are hung. But we always save the palace until after Thanksgiving, tradition. And some of the decorations, I have to point out, are so heavy that it takes 2 carpenters to handle them, because they're just so elaborately decorated. Now, we also get these uninvited guests. And we get them in our gardens, but they find the fruit, boy, and so the decorations are checked every single morning also. And if an apple has a bite out of it, it's replaced. Sometimes that replacement can be done on site. Sometimes the decoration has to be taken down and brought back to the design center and then brought back out. But usually it can be replaced on site. But keeping them as fresh as we possibly can is really important. And really it's the goal, it's the people that are visiting around Thanksgiving or the people visiting closer to Christmas see the same decorations and see them in the same condition. That's really important. And so in addition to decorating the entire historic area, we also provide some workshops and programs. Wreath decorating workshops. We have 4 this year. These little mug decorating workshops are really popular. We have 7 of them this year. And we're also running a wreath sale again this year, wreath and decorations sale. And I've got printed sheets if anybody is interested in these programs or possibly the wreath sale. But that's 4 days, and we're going to try that up at the Williamsburg Christmas Market this year. And we also will have the program which you all can go to about decorating the private homes. So with that, I have some recommended resources, which probably you're familiar with, most of them. And that concludes my talk for today. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have questions. I don't know if you have that built into your schedule, but okay.
Are there questions from the audience or from Zoom for Joanne?
Yes, sir.
You do the hotels now?
We do not do the hotels any longer. No. That 2017 was when that split off, and all those decorations are handled by an outside contractor.
Can you give us dates again for these workshops?
Sure, I have, I'll put it back up there. But I also have printed copies, if you'd like to take one.
Yes.
Anything else?
Yeah. How do reservations look this year for Christmas? And I mean, will there be enough visitors?
Oh, without a doubt. Last year was, yes, I'm sure there were, I mean, I don't have the exact count. Our programs are filling up, or our workshops, I mean, are filling up. There'll be, last year, even with things closed as much as they were, the streets were packed. And it's because this is something that people can do outdoors. It was really popular last year. And honestly, I'll tell you, the designers, they just went over and above, because they knew that. They knew that this probably was going to be, last year was going to be the most important year ever, because it was one thing that people could do outdoors safely. And without a doubt, the crowds were there. So I expect that will be the same this year, but things are also more open this year. So. Sir.
Could you give us an update on Boxwood?
Funny thing, I was just talking about that. We did, it's very hard to give it in like a little thing here. I've offered for my staff to do a presentation on Boxwood Light and how we're handling it in Colonial Williamsburg. We did it for our volunteers, but many of you are maybe not necessarily volunteers at Colonial Williamsburg. So I've offered to do that for master gardeners. I think it's really important information to share, not just how we're handling it, but why we're handling it the ways we are, and then how you can, look out for it in your communities. So we have it under control. I can tell you that. I think we do. But it's also so weather dependent. So it's hard to just do a quick thing on that, but I'd be happy to, and I'd like to give that presentation at another time. Maybe, I don't know what y'all. Anything else? Okay. Oh,
I just want to say, I thought that the squirrel in that arrangement, I thought maybe someone had put
yeah. No, ma'am. Squirrels, birds, guest thumbs, there's a lot of damage that happens to the fruit because the animals want to eat it, but also people want to see if is that a real apple? So they have to stick their thumbnail in it.
and all around, what are the things that you're able to decorate with that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have had that. Well, as I said, we use gomphrena, yarrow, pine cones. I mean, we collect off the ground the pine cones and anise, star anise off the tree at the Griffin. We collect a lot off of the properties. We cut the magnolias and cedar, especially when they have the blueberries. That's very popular for decorating.
Got a couple questions here.
Oh,
How is the
technology.
fruit mounted to the wreaths?
Okay, the fruit is mounted to the wreaths on a pick. So it's wired. The wire is put through the fruit, sometimes from the top with a little sort of a bent wire, sort of in the shape of a horseshoe, stuck through top to bottom. More often, and this is designer preference, through the middle, and then the wire goes down through the wreath, hopefully catching the wires on the back of the wreath, especially when we're dealing with, so that wire is then twisted around. Sometimes they're just wired to the wreath, sometimes they are put on a pick, and that pick is just stuck into the wreath. What else do we have?
Jim Aldridge wants to know, are the decorations misted with water to sustain freshness?
Well, we try to do that, not every day, but yes.
And Karen Brooks asked if I can get a copy of your schedule so I can send it to the people on Zoom. You said you had printed copies?
Yes,
Okay, I will
that's the
scan that
schedule.
and send it out to everybody.
Yeah, take a photograph. Okay, any other questions, sir?
Are there any preservative or any finish coat type of thing?
We used to get it dipped, all right, they actually used to do the dipping at Colonial Williamsburg. Then our supplier started dipping before he sent the materials. And that supplier my understanding is that they had that supplier for like 30 years. And I know at least 20 because the 2 years that we used fresh material in Riverwalk Landing, and it was only 2 years, I contacted Susan Dupree in Colonial Williamsburg to find out where she got the fresh decoration, because we're dealing with large quantities. So I started using J&J Treeland back then, and I know that was 20 years ago. But this year, J&J Treeland went out of business, and he'd been telling me for 2 years that he was going to go out of business, and I just said, please. But we found another supplier. They're out of state. I really tried to stay within the state of Virginia, but Christmas tree growers in the state of Virginia are fewer and fewer, and the remaining just cannot manage our quantities that we use. So we're working with a company called Mistletoe Tree Farm out of North Carolina. This is our first year. They make their wreaths a little different. But their quality was beautiful. We got samples of their roping and their wreaths, and they're just beautiful. So anyway, I think it'll be fun. I'm fine, but it was a little bit of a challenging time for a month or so trying to secure that new supplier.
I might ask if anybody online has a question.
Yes, does anyone else online have questions? If you would unmute and speak up, please.
Yeah, I'll go.
Yes, Elvin?
Yeah, has the COVID-related supply chain problems affected you getting any other materials for 2021?
Sir, the only issue that we have had within the recently were the bulbs that we plant. We're still planting bulbs, and we're usually finished at this time. Our bulbs were stuck on a ship outside of the port of the New York Harbor, because from there they go to Connecticut, who is really our, we work with a anyway.
Distributor?
Well, they're a broker, basically. We go through this company because they deal with all the different growers over in the Netherlands. I would have to be dealing with, 5 or 6 different growers to get all the different variety of older variety bulbs that we use. And that's key. That's what we're always dealing with, is finding someone that can supply these older varieties of flowers and bulbs for us. So we go through this broker, and then the bulbs come into New York Harbor, and then they go to Connecticut, and then they get shipped to Virginia. So there was supply issue with getting them off the ship, then getting a truck to truck them to Connecticut to be received and blah, blah, blah. And then another issue, getting them on another truck to Virginia. So we were 2.5 weeks late just from that. But that's really been the main thing that we've dealt with. Nothing with Christmas other than our supplier going out of business.
Don't have what?
Any other questions online?
Where
If
is
you-
the workshop site?
Yes, Hazel, would you restate your question,
Where
please?
is the workshop held?
Where
Okay.
is the
The
workshop?
Design Center, Colonial Williamsburg Design Center, is at 500 Packett's Court. So that's in the Kings Mill, Bush, thank you, Bush business area.
Any other questions? Well, if not,
Down to Busch Garden.
Joanne, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I'll leave these in case anybody.
She's an all business person. Am I muted? Nope.
Thank you for having me.
You all might mute yourself. We can hear you in the auditorium here.
Yeah.
No, this is a great group. Honestly, I have to take one more minute to thank so many of you are volunteers for us, and in one way or another, in many different areas. And honestly, we love our volunteers. We're so grateful for you, your time and your talent. But thank you.
Thank you again.